one of the things they teach you in biology is that in order to understand the root causes of a cancer, you have to first, to understand a cancer, you have to first understand the root causes of that cancer. And I think the root causes of the modern secular religion, the secular religion which says that your identity is based on your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation, actually traces its origins not to the 21st century, where we've seen this perpetuate itself in our schools and other aspects of our culture, but rather through to the 20th century, to the two most toxic ideologies of the 1900s. And to me, those began on the other side of the Atlantic. Those were the philosophies of German Nazism, which was identity politics on steroids, and Soviet Marxism, which was an oppressor-oppressed narrative on steroids. You combine the two, and you get their modern love child, as I call it, of wokeism here on American soil. And this is a new secular religion in our country whose belief system centers on the idea that your identity is based on your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation. That if you're black, you're inherently disadvantaged. That if you're white, you're inherently privileged. Crucially, no matter your economic background or your upbringing, that's where it parts ways with 20th century Marxism, your race and your gender is what govern who you are and the thoughts and ideas you're allowed to have. And I think it's really important that we look at this new philosophy with clear eyes that don't put words in the other side's mouth, but really take the other side at their own word for what this new ideology represents. And so I wrote this book, Woke Inc., last year that went on to be a New York Times bestseller or something like this. There was a much more successful book than mine, a much more successful New York Times bestseller by the name of How to Be an Anti-Racist, authored by Ibram Kendi. And early in his book, he lays out what's really the core thesis of the book, the idea that the remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination, that the remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. Agree or not, that's what the anti-racist movement claims as a core tenet of what it actually stands for today. So at least we can understand what the claim is before we debate it. Or the claims of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, a member of the squad in Congress, who famously said that we don't want any more black faces that don't want to be a black voice, that we don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice, full stop. Again, agree or not, we can first understand the essence of the claim before actually debating its merits. And I think embedded in that new worldview is an intellectual move that's really interesting. And I think it's one that we ought to see with clear eyes. It says that your race, your racial identity, is no longer about the color of your skin, about your melanin count, but it's about the content of the thoughts and ideas that you're allowed to have. And this isn't just an accident of an Ayanna Pressley quote. I think it's a core tenet of the new postmodern identity movement. Actually, there was a famous protest to Peter Thiel's speech at the RNC a few years ago, saying that it was offensive to call Peter Thiel gay just because he happened to be attracted to men, and he was a man who was attracted to men, because gay meant more than who you were attracted to on the basis of your sexual orientation. It was a political identity that stood for the content of the views that you were supposed to espouse, and so forth. And so that's actually what rests at the heart of this new ideology, is conflating the characteristics that you inherit on the day that you're born with the content of the viewpoints that you're ultimately allowed to have. And I think that lies at the heart of what makes dissent so difficult in this new cultural environment, because we also live in a moment where there is no greater damnation than to be called a racist. So if your race is no longer about your skin color but represents the content of your political beliefs, then by definition, any disagreement with those political beliefs leaves you vulnerable to the allegation of racism. And because there is no greater damnation than to be called a racist, that puts a lot of everyday Americans in the position of having to choose between bending the knee to that new religion or being tarred with the scarlet R. And when faced with that choice, everyday Americans are choosing to bend the knee. And I think that's what's created the greatest threat to our culture of free speech. It's not a legal assault on free speech, the kind of thing our founding fathers may have been concerned about 2.5 centuries ago. It is a cultural threat to the culture of free speech in our country, where a new culture of fear has eroded the norm of free speech in our country, whereby in the name of diversity, we've actually completely sacrificed true diversity of thought. In the name of inclusion, we've created an exclusionary culture where certain points of view just aren't welcome. In the name of democracy, we've actually eroded the very democratic norms of free speech and open debate that define what it means to be living in a worthy democracy. Actually, one of the things, if you ask me, about the best measure of the health of any democracy, it actually isn't the number of ballots that are cast every November. That's just fetishizing the final act at the end of the process. It is the percentage of people who actually feel free to express their true beliefs in public. And to me, there's no doubt that on that metric, we're doing abysmally today. There's data to back it up. In fact, there's a recent survey conducted by the Cato Institute which found that over 60% of Americans, that included Republicans, Democrats, and independents in the survey, 6 out of 10 of them said that they were afraid of expressing their true beliefs in public because of the current political environment. Personally, I can't remember a time in my life as an American born 36 years ago where there was a greater difference between what people were willing to express in private and what people were willing to say publicly. And to me, that is not America. 2008 financial crisis, most of you may remember it. I remembered it because my first job was in New York City in 2007 on the eve of the 2008 crisis. Back after the 2008 crisis, we lived in a moment where big business had just gone in this country from being viewed as the bad guys, or as being viewed as the guys who brought prosperity, to then being viewed as the bad guys in the back of the 2008 financial crisis. And for good reason, in some measure. I think that we can debate the policies of government-fueled bailouts, but ultimately, what we had was a period of time where a lot of bankers made a lot of money when time was good, and then they went to ultimately getting bailed out at the public fisc when times went bad. So understandably, a lot of people on the left, and even a lot of people on the right, myself included, had some issues with that instantiation of capitalism, which was really just another form of crony capitalism in disguise. So what happened was you had the Occupy Wall Street movement that was born that had a new demand that said that actually this system is broken. The thing that we need to do is to take money from all those wealthy corporate fat cats and redistribute it to poor people to help poor people. Agree or not, that is what the old left had to say. But there was the birth of this new woke left right around the same time that had a slightly different theory of the case. They said that actually the real problem wasn't quite economic injustice, as I alluded to earlier. No, it was racial injustice and misogyny and bigotry. And my view is that actually presented the opportunity of a generation for big business in this country to go from being the bad guys in the moment to actually becoming the good guys if they simply said the right things. Applaud diversity and inclusion. Put some token minorities on your boards. Muse about the racially disparate impact of climate change after you fly in a private jet to Davos. This is actually pretty good work if you can get it. But crucially, they didn't do it for free. They were happy to lend their money and lend, more importantly, their legitimacy to this new set of ideas. But they didn't do it for free. Their effective demand in return was that the new left look the other way when it came to leaving their own corporate power structures intact, because the old left was actually the biggest political threat to, let's just say, banking institutions in this country from the political perspective. But now, if the old left agreed to look the other way, that would ultimately be a grand bargain, a sort of Faustian bargain for each party, an arranged marriage for two parties that didn't necessarily love each other. They might have mutually disdained one another, but they were able to each get something out of the trade. That's how this new trend of so-called woke capitalism was born. A bunch of big banks got in bed with a bunch of woke millennials. Together, they birthed woke capitalism, and they used that to put Occupy Wall Street up for adoption. And that trade worked sufficiently well that other segments of the American business class started to get in on the act. I think Silicon Valley followed suit, where, again, they recognized that the historical threats to monopoly power used to come from the political left. But that if they could use their monopoly power, their set of corporate power, to service the ends of the left itself, they could use it to effectively defang the threats that they used to face, because the right was ultimately bound by their orthodoxies that say the free market can do no wrong and really can't come back punitively on their own terms. So what Silicon Valley realized is that they could use their monopoly power to censor, or in their language, moderate content that certain parts of the left found offensive. But again, they didn't do it for free. They effectively expected that the new woke left would look the other way when it came to leaving their own monopoly power intact. And again, it worked masterfully for both sides. That's the story of this arranged marriage. Not a marriage of love, but more like mutual prostitution. And the net result of that act was the birth of a new Leviathan, a new force in modern American life, what I call the woke industrial complex, that is far more powerful than big government or big business alone, because together it can do what neither one of them can do on its own. And by the way, the rest of corporate America jumped right in to get in on the act. Coca-Cola issuing new statements about a voting law in Georgia that make it sound more like a super PAC than a soft drink manufacturer, teaching its employees internally in its trainings how to be less white, to say nothing of its own role and its product's own role in fueling the nationwide epidemic of diabetes and obesity, including, by the way, in the black community they profess to care so much about. Or Nike, condemning slavery 250 years ago to no end, while doing nothing to reduce their reliance on slave labor today to produce $250 sneakers that they sell to black kids in the inner city who can't afford to buy books for school. That is how this new game is played. And it is a new force that is far more powerful than what Thomas Hobbes envisioned 400 years ago. It is a new force that is far more powerful than what our own founding fathers envisioned 250 years ago. And it was distorted by a new force that supercharged it in the last few years in particular. And this is a new actor who actually showed up on the scene and turned this bilateral arranged marriage into a three-party affair. That's the Communist Party of China, actually. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. What I'm going to describe to you is actually available in plain sight, so long as we're willing to look. What the Communist Party of China has understood is that actually this new marriage between the new progressive left and big business in America presented a geopolitical opportunity of a generation that they have, in the last couple of years in particular, exploited and exploited serially. We'll see its exploitation on display in the coming weeks during the upcoming Winter Olympics in Beijing. The way it works is that they've recognized that they can attack us not from the outside, but from within by eroding our greatest geopolitical asset of all. That's not our nuclear arsenal. It is our moral standing on the global stage, by effectively co-opting America's most venerated institutions to actually do their own bidding from within. So if you have any doubt about that, I'd encourage you to listen really carefully to what Xi Jinping has begun to say in recent years. As most of you are probably aware, China is in the midst of perpetrating one of the greatest human rights atrocities committed by a major nation since the Third Reich of Germany in what they're doing in the Xinjiang province to a population of religious minorities known as the Uyghurs, who are enslaved by the million plus in concentration camps, subject to forced sterilization, communist indoctrination, and worse. And yet when Xi Jinping is now pressed by the EU or the UN, every time the first thing he says is that Black Lives Matter shows that the United States is no better. This is not an accident. Less than a year ago, his top diplomat came right here to the Alaska summit, right here to the United States to the Alaska summit, and in his opening statement, criticized the United States slaughtering, that is his word, slaughtering of black Americans, and that he demanded that on behalf of China, he wanted to see the U.S. do better on human rights. This would be laughable if it weren't for the fact that our own corporations are actually lending implicit moral credibility to his claims. Take Disney, just a couple of years ago, says that it could not shoot a film in the state of Georgia if they passed the equivalent of a heartbeat bill, a new anti-abortion statute. Yet just last year goes to Mulan at literally ground zero of the Uyghur human rights crisis and films the entire movie there without compunction until the very end of the movie, where they finally muster up the courage, in the credits to the film, you can see it today, to thank the local CCP authorities in Xinjiang for allowing them the privilege of filming there. That's Disney. The NBA is far worse, regularly decrying racial injustice here at home, continuing to expand into the Chinese market abroad. LeBron James, a top star from my home state in Ohio, a few years ago, was the first person to come to China's public defense when Daryl Morey of the Houston Rockets tweeted, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." LeBron James ended up condemning what Daryl Morey had to say on behalf of Hong Kong and came to China's defense, as did Nike, as did the ownership of the Houston Rockets, as did other NBA stars.